Welcome to the next session of the conference with Dr. Jay Zigmont. Welcome, Dr. Jay.
Afternoon, evening, morning, whatever time it is for you.
Yes, and apologies for the delay in starting. I hope we haven't thrown anyone off. Thank you so much for joining, Dr. Jay. So before we get into my questions, I'll just quickly let people know about some of your work. So Dr. Jay Zigmont is the CEO and founder. Are you a co-founder or are you the singular founder?
I'm the founder.
The founder of Childfree Wealth. So 100% of the glory there. And Dr. J is also the co-host of the Childfree Wealth podcast and has also written a book named The Childfree Guide to Life and Money. Make your finances simple so your life without kids can be amazing. And you recently, I'm not sure how recently you did the TED Talk, but you recently had a TED Talk come out.
Yeah, it just came out this week. We did it a couple months ago, and it's interesting. For those not in the U.S., the child-free topics have been quite political, let's call it that. And it's more political actually in the South. And I gave this talk in Alabama, which is as deep red South as it gets. And I gave it the week that Charlie Kirk was shot when we were having some political violence.
Whoa, yeah.
To say I was scared giving it would be an understatement. I actually put out a podcast afterward talking about as the scariest thing I've ever done. But it's nice to see it's out and about. And of course, now nobody's surprised here. You know, you get the comments on social media, you know, how that's a bad way to live and all that other fun stuff. But
yeah,
you also get a lot of people enjoying it.
Yes. Yeah. No, 100%. So we wanted to get you on because, you know, as you'll be aware, if someone decides not to have a child, raise a child, they are maybe going to be more well suited than their similar counterparts who is raising a child to have the time and resources to do good in the world. I know that's obviously not always the case, but if you're not raising a child, you're probably going to have more time on your hands and more financial resources and other resources as well at your disposal. And so we wanted to get into that sort of thing specifically a bit later on, but I wanted to ask some more broader questions first. So the first broad question I wanted to ask was if there's someone watching who just hasn't thought about their personal finances at all, are there some sort of broad first things you think they should have a think about to get their house in order, basically?
Absolutely. In the book, we talk about it, the 8 no baby steps. Here in the U.S., there's a guy, Dave Ramsey, who has the 7 baby steps. So we had to have the 8 no baby steps. And kind of the first 3 are the same across both, which is, you know, have an emergency fund, get out of debt, and then get a fully funded emergency fund. And those are the basics. That's the foundation. You know, when I looked at the numbers of child-free people versus not, what I found was net worth was not a big difference, but debt level was, where we have less debt, like, which is a good thing. I think the hard part is, you know, we can get kind of used to using credit cards for everything else, build up debt, and then that hurts the rest. Once you get out of debt, then it becomes saving and investing towards your goals. And I'm specific about that because I think as a child-free person, the hardest part is figuring out, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, kind of, what does your life look like? You're not following the standard life scripts as you go to school, get married, have kids. You are following your script. And most folks, when I first work with them, they're like, I don't know what I want to do. And I'm like, well, then how do we know where to put your money? So, for example, buying a house is a choice for a child-free person, not a requirement. And in most cases with my clients, I tell them not to buy a house because you're going to move all the time. You have more flexibility. You're going to get a job offer somewhere. You're going to be like, hey, I want to go travel or whatever else it is. Where having a house is just tied down. But all the financial advice out there assumes you do have kids or you will. So they want you to own a house so you can pass it on to the next generation. It's not part of our plan. So we have to first figure out kind of what do we want to be when we grow up? What do we want our plan to look like? And then make our investments fit it.
Yeah. And I guess you've kind of answered this, at least in part. But are there any other broad ways that financial planning for someone who doesn't have children is going to differ from someone who does have children?
Yeah, there are a couple. So, and by the way, I'm a U.S. certified financial planner. So if Other countries, you have to translate your tax codes, your rules. But one of the big ones we see is the need for life insurance for child-free people is pretty low or zero. Like if you are single with no kids, you don't really need life insurance. And people will say, well, but I need to bury me. I'm like, nope, that's burial insurance. Like that's paying for those end of life, issues.
Mm.
Death benefits, you might be 6 months before you see those. So you don't necessarily need life insurance, but you need disability insurance. Because the issue is if you're disabled and you're single with no kids, you're kind of screwed. Like there's not a great way for the system to support you. Now, that's in the US. In other countries, a better system. So you got to work that through. Once you get through kind of life insurance, disability insurance, the next is figuring out your plan for long-term care. And your plan for long-term care is two things. How do you pay for it? And the second is who makes decisions for you when you can't. So those are kind of the hard ones for child-free people. Like in the US, the entire estate planning system assumes you have a next of kin. They assume your kid is going to make the decisions for you. They're going to take your assets. They're going to do all that. Well, when you don't have that, the system breaks. It's actually why I started a company called Childfree Trust. We're launching in January to be child-free people's next of kin. Like we're going to make their medical decisions for them, their financial decisions for them, be their executive trustee because it's hard. Right. The other part of that, though, is in addition to having somebody make the decisions, you have to have money to pay for long-term care. Mm-hmm. Now, the hard part for this one, I've had folks go, well, I'm going to move to another country that has better care. Well, every country has its own kind of quirks around that. Mm-hmm. What care is provided? How's the system designed? Some systems are still designed around really generational households and how does, that providing support. You need to have your own plan for it. And then kind of to bring it all together, the biggest difference for child-free people is we don't have a goal of passing on money to the next generation. My nephews get what's left over. If they get 10,000 or 100,000, that's fine. If they get $1 million, I made a mistake. And I say that because if I'm 90 and, when I die and they're 60, they don't really need the money then. I could have helped them earlier in my life if I wanted to. We have a college fund for them, all of that. Or I could have enjoyed the money myself. So we actually have to create a financial plan that embraces something called die with zero or winding down your wealth, where, over time, you're actually spending down your money. And that may mean you can retire earlier, or as a lot of child-free people do, like kind of cut back on work, embrace something called financial live early, but you have a lot more options.
And this wasn't actually one of my planned questions, but you kind of briefly mentioned the sort of politicization of this topic, and obviously only answer this question to the extent you're comfortable to. But so globally, we're seeing this trajectory of declining birth rates, and that is leading to the topic of having kids being more political, and you're seeing more sort of pro-natalist policies coming in many countries around the world. Do you have any idea of how that might impact the ability of child-free people to be able to exist within the sort of financial system? Do you think it will become harder if there's more sort of incentives put in place for people to have kids and stuff like this? Or do you have any sort of general vibe on how things might go?
Yeah, so this is a topic I dive into in my TED Talk. And really what I'm getting into is the first thing to remember is those pro-natalist policies in general don't work. Like Hungary has tried giving people complete income tax freedom if they have, I think it's more than 3 kids. Doesn't work. Japan has tried encouraging people to have kids, and we had to do it for Denmark. We have all the things. In the US, the Department of Transportation decided to give more highway money, for like roads to states that have higher than normal fertility rates and marriage rates. Doesn't move the needle. They want to give $5,000 for every kid that's born. Won't move the needle. So what that really ends up with is the system having an issue. And the issue is most of our economic systems, and vast majority of them, are based on a system of constant growth. So if there's not a constant growth, the system starts breaking down. Here in the US, the number is that if the fertility rates stay where they're at and people keep aging where they're at, the GDP will go down by about 4% over the next 20 years. Well, that's enough to put the US in a permanent recession or depression. And what we're seeing is people pushing back. Well, then we have to have more kids. And I'm like, well, that doesn't work. In my TED Talk, I said, hey, you have 2 choices. You either need to embrace legal immigration, which right now in the US, that is not happening, or you need to change the economic systems. Now, mind you, both of those are really, really politically hot issues in the United States. Here in Tennessee, where I live, they passed a law that in schools you have to teach the success sequence. Every grade, every class, you have to teach the success sequence. The success sequence says you go to school, you get married, you have kids.
Oh, really?
Yep. By law, got to teach it to everybody. So we're seeing these things go into law. We're seeing in the United States a bunch of things on reproductive rights and some restrictions there. I mean, there's a lot of negative to go along with that. From a financial standpoint, what countries do is they encourage behaviors they want by shifting the tax code. That's why Hungary gives a tax break for people that have a certain amount of kids. They get a break at each kid. It does not necessarily work to convince people who can't have kids or don't want to have kids to have kids. So my wife has a 50-50 chance of dying if she gets pregnant. I don't care how much money you throw at us. Like, it's just not happening. But then the child-free folks will go, well, but I'm not getting those benefits. And you're absolutely right, because you are not behaving in the way they want. And it's really interesting as you start kind of looking at the rules and different things that happen. So, for example, child-free people in the U.S., 1/3 will never marry. Well, a lot of the benefits go to married couples. In the U.S., the Heritage Foundation put out a report saying we need a Manhattan Project to encourage more hetero marriages and babies. You're gonna see this stuff. What I found is in the U.S. in this kind of current year of politics, the number one thing I heard from folks is I want to get my finances straight so that I have options. I was like, what do you mean? Like, maybe I go to another country. Maybe I do something different in my life. Maybe I move to a different state. Because one of the things that people overlook is financial independence. True financial independence mean you have the option to do whatever you want. They used to call it FU money, where you could tell somebody to F off. Well, that's kind of the point. And as one of my colleagues said, what's the point of having FU money if you never tell somebody to F off? And the answer is, well, that's true. So we need to watch out for ourselves so that if we get chased out, we have an option.
Yeah, because the future is so uncertain. I guess it's hard to give specific advice about how someone can prepare for it, apart from the fact that you can do broad stroke things to kind of maximize what options you might have in the future to then make the decision.
And I think the other thing that we've been working on, and just kind of food for thought here, we've actually been working on exit plans to specific countries, areas, getting visas, getting residency, like permits, citizenships, other things, to have backup plans. I can't tell you what the future is going to look like. I have no clue. But what I can do is help you to make a plan for what if.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask some questions now that are more geared towards if someone is wanting to sort of build into their life, donating to charity or doing good in some other way. So is there any general advice? So if someone came to you, and they said, I've decided not to have children. I am obviously wanting to make financial decisions that are going to mean I can live sustainably, obviously. So emergency fund, that sort of stuff. But I also want to build into my plan a capacity to be able to sort of donate in the long term. Is there any general advice you'd give to someone who has that specific requirement?
Yeah. So the first thing we do with folks is we'll ask them kind of what do they want their legacy to be. It's this concept of legacy without lineage. You can leave something behind without having a genetic legacy. And the exercise I'll bring them through is what is the second line of your obituary. So the first line is like Jay died at this age at this location. The second line usually says father 3 leaves behind Jack, Joe, and John. That's not us. So what does that say? Because what I'm trying to do is get people to focus in on what do they care about and where do they want to make an impact. Because once you identify that, then we can make sure your money fits those values. So let me give you an example. I had a client who we had this conversation. She goes, look, really the impact I want to make is I want to have the best garden in the neighborhood where all the butterflies come and everybody gets to come, look at the garden, walk through it, and it makes a big impact on their life. See, people think about like charitable giving, and that is a great option. But you know what? If she put her time and effort into her garden, she's giving back in a different way that matches her legacy. So the first step is kind of figure out what impact you want to make. The next step is the finances of it. So when it comes to leaving a legacy or leaving impact, I want you to do it while you're alive, not once you're dead. So they talk about it as giving with a warm hand instead of a cold hand. The cold hand is after you pass. If you give while you're alive, at least in the US, you get tax breaks. If you give after you die, you get nothing. The other
Right.
bonus of giving while you're alive is you get to be involved and you get to see the impact.
Mm.
So let me give you an example. I have a client, he's working through how does he give away millions of dollars? And he started giving like $10,000 here and there to charities. And he's a really smart dude because what he did was he said, look, let me give him $10,000 and see what they do with it. See how they interact with me, see what they do with the money, see how it works. And it's been amazing to see. So, for example, he went to give to a charity that works with veterans here in the US. And this charity works with it's like a suicide crisis line for veterans. He called the place to give the money. They didn't answer the phone. He finally gives up and calls the crisis line, which is supposed to be the 24/7, emergency response. Nobody answered. He's like, I'm not giving them money. They don't even do their basics.
Mm.
On top of, in the US, we can look at their tax forms and other things where you can start testing the charities. He gave to another one. He gave him $10,000 for a scholarship and has never heard back. No idea of what the money went to, who it helped, how did it go. Yet he gave it to another one, and they've been so engaging into what they do. And he's been talking about either maybe even joining in one of their boards and being part of one of their galas and being part of where it can be part of who you are.
Mm.
And it's a matter of finding that right partnership between you and that charity. And you want to do that while you're alive, not after you pass.
Yeah, I had a quick question. This is obviously, like you said, a lot of the things that we talk about it's going to vary depending on what country you're in. But I wondered, you're obviously encouraging people to give when they're still alive, as opposed to once you've passed on, right?
Correct.
And I share that sympathy. I think that is a good way to go. But I wonder, because there seem to be clear advantages, and you've laid some of them out. If someone is wanting to leave something in their will, do you know if there's like a significant time delay after someone's passing to when that is actually actioned?
Yeah, so here's a couple things on the will. We just did a study on this and asked, now I'm using US stats. We asked people in the US who are child free, do you have a will, a medical power of attorney, financial power of attorney, and a trust? And we found that less than 20% of child free people had a will. And that's scary to me because in the US, if you don't have a will, they'll look for your next of kin. But if they can't find one, the state takes the money, which nobody wants.
Mm.
So, your question about the delay is good. But the first question is, do you have a will?
Right. Yeah.
This is an absolute must. If you're a child-free person, you must have a will, must have a medical power of attorney, financial power of attorney, And people go, well, that costs money. I'm like, you're right. But you know what's better than having the money go to the state? Having a plan. You put it in place and you have that. And you have to find somebody you trust to be the executor of the will, who's going to actually make those decisions for you. In the US, that's a big issue because it's different rules in each of the states. And that's why we set up Child Free Trust to do this. But that executor is going to be the one giving the money to charity. Now, if you gave the charity one of your retirement accounts in the US, they'll get the money probably a couple months after you passed.
Right.
If it's got to go through the whole court system and probate, it's probably a couple of years. And depending on the executor, it may or may not get there. So there's some interesting stats looking at this. A lot of charities do a lot of work, and they actually find that child-free people give about 3 times as much as people with kids, which not really surprising, but at least it's nice to see the data.
Yeah.
But one of the things they're finding is people go, oh, well, my nephew is going to be my executor. They're going to follow my wishes. But the executor has some leeway, and the money never really gets to charity. Now, by law, they have to do that. But who's going to go sue your nephew because they didn't send the money to the charity? This is a problem. Because the nephew's well, I have to pay for my expenses of being the executor or use the money. There's lots of games you can play. So you want to make sure you have a professional fiduciary who is following your wishes to make sure it goes to the charity. And some charities will actually serve as your executor so that they can make sure they get the money.
Mm. Did in the research you just did you get any sense as to why so many child-free people didn't have wills? Is that just a general thing of people just not having wills, or is there a specific issue with child-free people?
So the general number of everybody across the US is about 1/3 of people have wills in place.
Right.
So we're running a little behind. Now, when you look at the data and you say, when do people get a will? or power of attorney, the number one answer is when they have kids. Because like, who's going to take my kid if I pass? Or how do I make sure my kid's set up? So like, we don't have that default choice. What we're finding is, turns out about 3/4 of child-free people have pets. And it may be that getting a will in place to take care of their pets will make them get it done. Like, it sounds silly, but like, hey, my wife's going to be more worried about my dog than she is about the money. You know, so I think part of it is we don't have that natural kind of force, and it's something nobody wants to do. Like, do you really want to talk about yourself dying? Or they'll say like, I don't have enough money to have a will. Well, part of your estate package, in addition to the will, is your medical power of attorney, which is a piece of paper that says who makes decisions for you when you can't. You know, when you're dead, you don't care as much. But when you're alive and like disabled, you want to make sure someone who knows you, trusts you, is who you trust is making the decisions rather than the state making the decisions. So it's actually, we're calling it the child-free care crisis because it's such a big issue for us as child-free people. And part of the reason in the US, and we saw this in our data, is about a half the folks just didn't have somebody's name to put down. You know, if you don't have a next of kin, who do you put down to make decisions for you? Well, if I don't have a name, how am I going to do the paperwork? You know, our estate as child-free people are pretty simple. You know, give my money to charity or give it to my nephews or whatever else it is. There's not fancy stuff there, but it's the harder part of like, who does it? We call the fiduciary void. Who is that fiduciary that we can trust to actually make the decisions for us?
Yeah. So I wasn't aware that you were setting it. Did you refer to it as the Child-Free Trust?
Yep.
Yeah. So I wasn't aware that you were setting that up, but that's really cool. Did you base that on like, is there another version of this in another country or another place, or are you like, this is the first sort of concept of it?
So I've been working on child-free finances and financial life planning for a little over 4 years, 4.5 years, something like that. And when I started on this concept, there was nothing in the financial literature about it. Like, just doesn't exist. Everything assumes you have kids. And when I started my financial planning firm, one of the first questions I ran into is like, well, who's going to make decisions when they can't? And I went hunting, like talked to everybody I could find, talked to all different lawyers, services, other things. And in the US, there's 2 states out of 50 where you can appoint a professional fiduciary to take care of you. In the other 48 states, you're out of luck. So I've been over the past 3.5 years or so creating a way to do it. It took me 18 months just working with regulators to get something to get approved to make this work. I recently had somebody reach out to me from an EU country that wants to, make a similar one over there. That's great. Like we're trying to expand the idea, but we had to do all the work. We now have a patented system. We're actually launching at the Consumer Electronics Show here in the US in January to do this nationwide for child-free people.
That's great. That's as someone who, I don't have kids, I'm not planning to have kids. You have these discussions with people about, this natural question arises about planning for the future, especially when you're elderly. And as you said, you may become disabled in some way. And often we're just kind of grasping at straws, and it's just like, I'll save up and just hopefully figure it out. But that's actually like a really practical, it's a really good, like, concrete way of helping alleviate these issues that child-free people are very likely going to face, or not very likely, but could face when they're older. So hats off to you for that.
Here's the number: 1/3 of people will die in their sleep and never need long-term care. So
really, 1/3.
1/3.
I hope I'm one of those thirds.
That's it. Like, I'm like, you won the game. Like, we have people, they buy the long-term care insurance to pay for this stuff, and they're like, what if I don't use it? I'm like, then you won the game. Like, if you can die in your sleep, never need care, you won. It's the other 2/3 that becomes an issue. And one of my colleagues, I did a podcast, and he was talking about taking care of his mom and how much work it is to take care of his mom. And anyone that's ever done this for a parent knows how much work it is. And he said, look, she's 90 something. She's in a nursing home, and they're like, they won't give her chips because of her diet. He's like, she's 90 something. Just give her damn chips. Who cares? Like, it's her one joy in life. Give her chips. And then his question to me was, who makes sure I get my chips? And I was like, that is the question. Like, people, the finances and all that, like, that's somewhat easier to plan. It's the who makes sure to fight for you for your chips and
Yeah.
knows that you want the chips.
Yeah. Yeah. So back to donating. So I'm sure I think I may have missed others, but I know you've done at least one podcast episode on your podcast about donating. You may have done others that I missed. And in that episode, you referenced that there are some like non-monetary issues that can face people when they're thinking of donating that hold them back from donating money. It's obviously the obvious monetary issue is if you don't have the money, you can't donate money, right? But even if you have the money, there might still be barriers or things holding you back from donating. Can you just shed light on what some of those are and how people could maybe overcome them?
Yeah, I think the hard part is this. We talk about this end of life question, and this is the one like people go like, "Well, I'm going to end up on the streets eating cat food if I give my money away." I don't know why it's always cat food, but it's always cat food. And like maybe it's tastier than dog food, but like the issue is you have a plan that's broken. Like for people who say, "Well, I'm not sure I can give that away because I may need it." There's a plan in the United States that's called a CRAT, a Charitable Remainder Annuity Trust, where what you can do is you can give your money to the charity, you get a tax break this year, but you have a guaranteed income off that for the rest of your life. I can take care of the financial side for you.
Right.
There's ways to do it. On the personal side, some folks say, "Hey, I don't have the money to do it," and they may not. There are other ways to give. Like I had a client who had enough money to retire, was all that, but kind of, didn't hate her job, but didn't love it. She decided to work full time just to take care of charities. Like every penny she made went to charity. I have others donate their time. My wife spent yesterday all day at one of the local food banks helping them out with their stuff. There are lots of ways to give. It's just about how you feel best about it. I think the other one that people face is just don't know where to put their stuff. Like people are like, I'd give it to a charity, but how do I know which one?
Mm.
And the answer is you don't. You just go try it. What I will tend to ask folks is, who are the people that made an impact on your life that you care about? And they'll go, oh, well, growing up, I love, blah, blah, blah. Well, perfect. Let's start there as a charity. They made an impact on your life. How do you make an impact on theirs? The other part people get into is like charity, you get a tax break. But sometimes the best giving are friends and family, where if you can help them through a rough time, or you can buy them time with a financial planner or a personal trainer or something to help their life give away, you can actually help them get better. The one thing I do say, if you're giving to family or friends, you never give cash. Why? Because if you give them cash, you end up like an ATM machine. Like there's just every once in a while, there's that family member that's like going to take advantage of you. Like I don't give cash to family. I'll pay their oil bill. I'll pay their groceries. I will do stuff for them. But I don't want to be the one they're always coming to the first of the month begging for money.
Right. Yeah. And when you have people coming to you and they say, part of their plan is they want to donate, a significant amount of money, maybe not in one go, but like over the course of their life. Are there like some core mistakes that you often see people have?
Yeah. So the best way to give money in the US is to give away appreciated stock. So whether it's in your retirement account, your brokerage account, you can give away stock that has gain on it, and then the gain disappears. Well, the kind of mistake to make is people sell their stock and then pay taxes on it and then give what's left over to the charity. Well, if you just give the charity taxes to the stock directly, they don't pay taxes on it. So
Right.
you can essentially give them 20 or 30% more. There's some key things you can do that have to do with tax planning that fit there. I think the other thing is that you can give them pretty much anything. Charities are pretty good about like, whatever you want to give me, I'll take. So I've had folks giving homes and cars and other things, but it's about finding the right charity that can leverage that and making sure it hits your financial and personal plan appropriately.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting. Do you know if that's like a pretty specific thing to the US to be able to give I can't remember what you called it, but like
Appreciated stock.
yeah.
It's going to vary country by country. So any of the countries that have good rules around like we give you tax breaks for your donations will have something like that.
Right.
so in the US, the way it works, for example, there's a IRA, which is a retirement account, and essentially you owe taxes on that. So when it comes out, you're going to pay taxes. You can just, instead of taking the money yourself, give it to a charity and just never pay the taxes. There are structures like that exist. You need to figure out the one that fits there. What happens is people who have been good at saving money, good at investing on their own, can do that on their own. You really need to find a financial planner that can help you on the tax side. And the general rule I tell everybody is you ask the planner how your plan is different because you'll never have kids. And the number one answer you're going to get back is, well, you'll change your mind. I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to walk out if I get that answer. The number two answer you'll get is it's not different. If they say that, you'll walk out. The number three is actually, I don't know, let's figure it out. And I'm okay with that answer. But like, they have to understand how our plan is different. Because in actuality, financial planners, their incentives are there for them, for your money to always be in the account. And for you to give it away to charity might cost them money.
Yeah, so in the UK, we have this thing called gift aid. So for anyone that is watching that might not be aware of it, so it's essentially, I mean, I'm sure even though you're based in the US, you may know even more about it than me, but the way I understand it to work in the UK is that so you're obviously taxed on income, but then if you want to donate some of your income to a charity that is eligible, obviously, for gift aid, then let's say you donate, £100, the government will then give a bump on that of 25%. So you'll actually be giving £125, but it only costs 100 to you. And in my understanding, that's essentially to compensate for the fact that you would have been taxed originally. So it's basically just taking away the fact that you've been taxed on your donation. Do you know? Again, I know you're sort of specific to the US, but are you aware of any like really cool systems that other countries have around the world that people might want to look into?
So my favorite, you used that UK example, and you kind of stole my example. But what's nice about the UK system, essentially, it works out the same math as what I was talking about with the US system of you not getting taxed. The charity gets X. The cool systems, let's talk about it a little differently, rather than countries, are by companies. So you're seeing a lot of companies that will offer to match charitable giving for their employees. Because like companies like, whatever, they have a goal to give away $1 million a year. They don't really care which charities they give it to. Hey, you give $500 to your favorite local charity. That works. Now, one of the things to watch out for, in particular with this group, so in the US, we have something called donor advised funds. They're held at brokerage firms. There are ways to give money, but they're called donor advised for a reason. The donor gets to kind of like say, hey, in the future, I want to give this money to a charity. You don't have to specify it right now, but it's advised, not like guaranteed. So we've actually had some charities that are donor advised funds that were refused to donate to charities that are around reproductive rights or some of the more political issues. So if you're working on with companies, other things, you want to make sure whatever charity you're giving to, they are willing to match or give the money to, because we are seeing some say no.
Yeah, that's a good point actually, in that it's not like a government-based scheme, but it's a company-based scheme. I've heard of friends who have donated through companies, with the benefit of a company scheme. I was wondering, one thing that's going to determine how much someone wants to donate is obviously going to be how much money they have, right? Are there any other factors about someone that might make different individuals give differently that you think are quite sensible? One obvious one might be, say if you have some sort of disability that you're going to expect to need care for, in the future, that's very like a reasonable expectation. But is there anything else that people should take into account when considering how much they'd want to donate?
Yeah, if we use the disability example, if you have like a disability, okay, cool. That's the case where you give money after you pass. Like whatever's left when I'm done, great, because I have a need. The other one that gets kind of interesting, it's a little tangent from what you're asking, is don't ask your family what you should do with your money. And I say this kind of tongue in cheek, but you all know what I'm talking about. I had somebody recently who very charitably minded. We were going to do something that happened there, help their taxes well. And once we started doing the plan, they started talking to their family members. Their family was like, no, you must give that to your niece or nephew. I'm like, no, I don't. That's my money. I can do whatever I want with. I think the hard part is if you ask more people about what to do with your money, they're going to say whatever they think you should do from their eyesight. The other one we get is people, in particular, people who are, your parents or family members who have kids. They go, well, you're going to need that money later. And I'm like, how do you know? And they're like, well, because that's my plan. Now, they won't actually say that, but like, that's where that is. And it's just this thing where people, I think they're well-meaning, but they try to put onto you what their personal beliefs are. So if you ask a parent, hey, are you going to be giving a bunch of money away to charity? They're going to go, no, because I need to leave money to the next generation. So obviously you need to too. And they may not be that blatant about saying it, but we have those voices in our head that say that. So when people say, well, I can't give to charity, I often ask why. And every once in a while, somebody will be like, I'm not charitably inclined. Cool. There's some people like, it's just not the way they're wired. That's fine. But for most, it's like this other voice in their head that says you can't. And why? And as I pull that apart, they'll often find like their fathers in their head or their family member or a friend or whatever else saying they can't. And then what I will do is actually do a full financial plan and show them at the end of their life, hey, you're dying with millions of dollars. Giving away $1,000 today is going to make no difference on that. And it takes them a while to get used to it.
Mm. Yeah. So we're coming up to closing. We've got about 5 minutes left. And I have a couple more questions. There was one that I really wanted to get in because I know it's quite relevant to our current circumstance. So I'll ask that one now, which is, do you have any thoughts? And I know obviously there's a lot of uncertainty around this, but do you have any thoughts around how the rising prominence of AI, artificial intelligence, and essentially everything we do is going to? Do you have any sense of how it's going to affect child-free people's ability to plan financially? Obviously, it might impact their work. It might have implications for things like end-of-life care, all this sort of stuff. Do you have any broad thoughts and tips that you might want to convey to people that are related to AI?
So here in the U.S., this week is Thanksgiving, and I spent Thanksgiving with my nephew, who's 13 years old, arguing over AI. And his take at 13 was, we should not use AI because it's taking jobs away from coders. And my take is the only way to protect yourself from AI is to be the one running the AI. Like you have to be the one leading it and understanding how it works. And if you're avoiding learning how to use AI, you are hurting yourself because it's already here. You can't just like block your eyes, block your ears and say, no, I'm not going to do it. You have to learn how to embrace it and how to use it in your job, in your work, and everything else. I use it every single day. Me and my wife have fights about using it because she's a researcher. We're both researchers. She thinks it's evil to use it for research. I say it gets the research out faster. Now you still got to check it. You still got to work through it. I will say on the aging standpoint, I had a really interesting meeting last week or a week before with a company called CareFlick. And what they're doing is they're making AI avatars so that you have somebody to check in with and be your kind of like AI buddy as you age. I don't know if it's going to stay. I saw something recently, a robot to do that, all that. Saw somebody building that into a lamp. Why a lamp? I don't know. But the AI future is here. From a financial standpoint, where I'm at is I think it's time to save up some money and learn new tactics. If you can't figure out how to shift your job to embrace AI, you're going to be wiped out by AI. And people go, well, they're not going to wipe out plumbers. Well, that's true until robots can do that. I was at an aging conference about a month ago, and they said one of the first things that people do as they retire is they buy a new Toyota. And it's just kind of like a random car, but just, happens to be a Toyota. And I said, well, it costs you $40,000 or $50,000 nowadays, and you buy a good, reliable car. Well, what happens when people retire now in the future and they buy a robot for $40,000? Because that's about what they cost. Well, that robot might be able to help you do a lot of those day in, day out things. Now, mind you, it still can't be your power of attorney, executive trustee, but you can do that. But you need to have the money to do that. and you've got to be willing to embrace the technology. You know, we already lost the fight of whether or not AI is going to take all the jobs. It's just a matter of which side you're on.
Yeah, it's I personally I find it very hard to make future oriented decisions because of AI, because it's we just don't know how the world is going to look. And in my head I often go back to what you were saying before about basically just act in a way now that's going to give you as many opportunities in the future, basically, so that you can kind of pick which one you want to go for. But it's very uncertain times, so it's hard to make hard and fast sort of judgments about things. I had maybe we can fit in one or two final quick questions. So one quick question I had. So I'm sure everyone who's watching now is probably familiar with giving like maybe £100, £50, something like that. But there might be some people out there who are wanting to give much more significant sums. Should those people be donating in different ways if you're wanting to give a more significant sum, or are all donations essentially the same? You just go on the company website, click the donate button, blah, blah, blah. Or is someone looking at donating larger sums? Are there things available to them that they can do so more effectively?
If you're looking at giving a larger sum, you got to work with a financial planner to figure out the tax implications. So, for example, in the US, if you're going to give $100,000, let's just use that one, I'll have them give $100,000 1 year and then give no money for a couple of years, because it actually works better for their taxes.
Right.
And if we're giving appreciated stock, which stock we like, there's a bunch of like tweaks that happen with it. But the key is you need good planning. This is not just like, I'm going to write a $100,000 check to some random charity. The other thing is you want to know everything about that charity that happens. So, for example, I had somebody that wanted to give $5 million to a charity, and the charity's total budget per year was like $1 million. And I'm like, you will destroy that charity by giving them $5 million overnight. And the reason is they don't have a structure for like what to do with it. And, often when that happens, charities start spending money on stuff that doesn't have a benefit. And if they don't have a good plan on what to do, if they got, quadruple their normal amount, then they end up eating themselves, or the CEO ends up taking $1 million paycheck.
Yeah. I think that's all we're going to have time for. But thank you so much for your time. Obviously, we'll make sure people have links to Childfree Wealth, to the podcast, to the book, also to the TED Talk, and obviously congratulations on the TED Talk as well. We'll be sending out a newsletter tomorrow with those links, just so the audience knows, so they'll get all of that. But yeah, thank you again, Dr. J, for your time and sharing some of that child-free wealth wisdom with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I think one last thing I can add, if you can, listen or watch the TED Talk, share it. What we're finding is the algorithms don't like sharing topics that have the word child-free in them. So we have to game the algorithm ourselves. Yeah, when I went to advertise my book on Amazon, they denied the ad because the word child-free was in it.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah. There's some good, I've got some good anecdotal data to prove that the algorithms purposely do not share that content. So we all as a community need to go above and beyond to do it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. Like I said, the link will be in the newsletter, so everyone who have access to that. But thank you for letting me know that. That's interesting. But yeah, we'll leave it there. Thank you again, Dr. J, and have a good rest of the day.